Welcome back to The Obsession. A quick recap. Stop. If you haven't watched part 1 of the story yet, you are missing the most chaotic, heart-melting, and hilarious slow burn in Mafia history. Remember when Kang-dae's most terrifying 6'3" silver-haired syndicate boss completely lost his mind over a pair of lips? We watched him suffer through 3 months of absolute torture. We saw him trace his own lips in his penthouse window like a lovesick teenager, completely ruin a high-stakes boardroom meeting by describing a sensual siege, and almost kiss our gorgeous fashion mogul, Amara, after catching her in a dramatic, gravity-defying fall at the art gala. If you want to feel the full, heart-pounding tension of how this ruthless giant finally broke down, ran to her house in the middle of the night, and delivered the most passionate confession of his life, pause this right now, run back, and watch part 1. You'll thank me. Before we continue with the story, tell us in the comment section where you are watching us from so we can greet you in our next video. Today's greeting is going to Celestin Yoon 5855. You are the heartbeat of this channel. I see you, I appreciate you, and I am so incredibly happy to have you here. For those of you who are ready, let's step right back into the warmth of that rainy night. The heavy door of Amara's penthouse clicked shut, sealing out the cold, rain-slicked streets of Seoul. Inside, the only sound was the shallow, ragged breathing of 2 people who had finally stopped running from themselves. Kang-dae's hands were still cupping Amara's face, his thumbs gently resting just below her cheekbones. His eyes, usually as sharp and unyielding as flint, were soft, dark, and swimming with a vulnerability he had never allowed himself to feel. "I thought I was strong enough to stay away," Kang-dae whispered, his deep, gravelly voice vibrating against her skin. "But every hour without you felt like slowly bleeding out." Amara let out a shaky, emotional laugh, her hands resting flat against his massive, warm chest. She could feel his heart hammering beneath his damp shirt, a frantic, wild rhythm that matched her own. "You idiot," she murmured, her beautiful lips parting in a soft, breathless smile. "You wasted 3 whole months making me believe I was crazy for wanting you." Moving with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a man of his size, Kang-dae guided her over to the plush velvet sofa. He sat down and pulled her onto his lap, wrapping his thick, tattooed arms around her tall, elegant frame. He buried his sharp face into the crook of her neck, inhaling the sweet, comforting scent of vanilla and cocoa butter that had haunted his dreams for months. As they sat in the dim warmth of the living room, the conversation turned sweet, honest, and filled with a profound, lingering regret. "Why did we wait so long?" Amara asked softly, her fingers gently threading through his damp, silver-gray hair. "We spent months staring at each other in my boutique, pretending we were just business partners. I cried myself to sleep last night because I thought you looked at me and saw nothing but a liability." Kang-dae pulled back slightly, his sharp face tightening with genuine pain. "I was a coward, Amara," he admitted, his eyes locking onto hers. "My entire life has been a war. I have spent years burying my feelings because, in my world, love is a weakness that gets people killed. I thought that by keeping my distance, I was keeping you safe. But last night, when I walked away from you at the gallery, I realized that a life without you isn't a life at all. It's just survival. I regret every single day I spent staring at you from across a room when I could have been holding you like this." Amara leaned up, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to his jaw, right where a dark tattoo crawled up from his collarbone. "We both let our pride and our fear build a wall between us, but the wall is gone now." The rest of the night passed in a beautiful, slow blur. There was no rush, no urgency, only the quiet joy of finally being close. Kang-dae was fascinated by her. He spent hours just holding her hand, tracing the delicate lines of her palms with his large, scarred fingers. But his gaze always returned to his ultimate weakness. With unbelievable tenderness, he would raise his thumb and slowly trace the outline of her full, plush lips, watching the way they parted slightly under his touch. "They are even softer than I imagined," he whispered, a rare, boyish smile breaking across his sharp features. "You are completely obsessed," Amara teased, biting her lower lip in amusement. Kang-dae's eyes darkened instantly, his grip on her waist tightening. "I told you the rule, Amara. No lip biting. I am still a man, and my self-control has already been thoroughly destroyed tonight." They laughed together, a warm, intimate sound that filled the penthouse with a light it had never known before. They whispered about their wishes for the future, making quiet promises in the dark. Kang-dae vowed to dismantle the threats around him to build a safe haven for her. And Amara promised to be the anchor he could always return to when the storm of his world grew too loud. Gray clouds, casting a soft, golden light across the bedroom. The world felt entirely different. Kang-dae lay awake, his massive arms securely wrapped around Amara's waist, anchoring her to him. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city of Seoul gleaming and fresh. As Amara stirred against his chest, her eyes fluttering open to greet him with a bright, sleepy smile, Kang-dae felt a deep, profound peace settle into his soul. The silent war was over. The Mafia boss had surrendered not to an enemy, but to the love of his life. But as he looked down at her beautiful face, he knew a different kind of battle was about to begin. The morning light of the first day of their official relationship did not bring the usual peace of a soft romance. Instead, it brought reality crashing back. Amara stood in front of her full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of a crisp, tailored cream blazer. She looked every bit the powerful, self-made entrepreneur she was. But as she reached for her handbag, a heavy, tattooed hand gently but firmly gripped her wrist, pulling her back. Kang-dae stood behind her, his towering 6'3" frame casting a protective shadow. His silver-gray hair was loosely pushed back, and his sharp face was set in a tight, serious expression. The dark tattoos on his neck flexed as he spoke, his voice low and heavy with dread. "Amara, we need to talk before you step out of that door," he said, turning her to face him. "My world is not a game. Yesterday, you were an independent business owner. Today, you are the woman of the head of the city's largest syndicate. My enemies are vultures. They look for any weakness, any crack in my armor. And right now, you are my heart. That makes you their primary target." Amara listened, her eyes locking onto his. But as she processed the gravity of his words, her nervous habit kicked in. Unconsciously, she began playing with her lips, parting them slightly, sliding her lower lip to the left, then gently biting the right corner as she thought. Kang-dae's serious, threatening speech instantly died in his throat. His eyes dragged down to her mouth, his brain completely short-circuiting. Are you actively trying to kill me before breakfast?" Kang-dae groaned, his tough guy facade completely evaporating into a look of sheer, helpless defeat. Amara stopped, blinking in confusion. "What? I'm listening to you. How am I supposed to explain tactical security measures when you are doing that with your mouth?" He stepped closer, a teasing, dangerous smirk playing on his sharp lips. "I am trying to save your life, and you are actively plotting my assassination via distraction." Amara let out a beautiful, rich laugh, giving his muscular chest a playful shove. "You are completely ridiculous, Kang-dae. But seriously, I hear you. However, I am rejecting the security detail." Kang-dae's smile vanished. "Excuse me?" I built my brand from the ground up in Atlanta and in Seoul, Amara said, her voice filled with fierce, unyielding pride. I am strong. I face angry suppliers, corrupt landlords, and difficult clients every day. I do not need a parade of scary men in black suits ruining the aesthetic of my boutique and making my clients nervous. I can protect myself. Kang-dae stared at her, deeply admiring her strength, but his mafia instincts were screaming. Amara, a corrupt landlord, does not carry a suppressed pistol. This is not up for negotiation. It is my shop, Kang-dae. My rules, she said, giving him a quick, breathless kiss on the cheek before slipping past him and out the door. 3 hours later, Amara's confidence was put to the ultimate test. She was in her high-end Gangnam boutique, organizing a new shipment of imported Italian silk dresses. The atmosphere was peaceful, scented with white tea, until the glass doors were violently pushed open. 3 men in flashy cheap suits swaggered in. They didn't look like clients. They looked like street muscle. The leader, a slimy thug from a rival gang called the Iron Wolves, smirked as he looked around. With a careless flick of his hand, he deliberately swiped his arm across a rack, sending a dozen expensive silk dresses tumbling to the dusty floor. Amara's floor manager let out a terrified gasp, shrinking back. But Amara did not shrink. Her blood ran boiling hot. She stepped out from the display area, her tall, striking frame radiating absolute fury. Pick them up. Amara's voice was like ice cutting through glass. The leader of the thugs turned, his eyes sweeping over her tall curves, finally landing on her face. A slow, greasy grin spread across his face. Well, well, aren't you a gorgeous thing? Quite the fiery tongue you've got. And those lips? Damn, it'd be a shame if a pretty girl with lips like that got hurt because she refused to pay the neighborhood protection tax. He reached out a hand, intending to patronizingly pat her cheek. Before his dirty fingers could even come close to her skin, the front glass doors of the boutique didn't just open, they exploded inward as Kang-dae kicked them off their hinges. The 3 thugs spun around, their faces instantly turning a sickly, pale white. Kang-dae stepped into the boutique like a demon rising from the underworld. He wasn't wearing his polished business suit. He wore a black leather jacket, his silver gray hair damp from the rain. His sharp face twisted into a mask of pure, murderous rage. Behind him, Minjun and 4 massive, heavily armed syndicate soldiers poured into the room, instantly locking the exits. Kang-dae didn't even look at the thugs. He sprinted straight to Amara, his large hands frantically grabbing her shoulders. His eyes scanning her face, her neck, her arms. Did they touch you? Did they hurt you? Tell me, his voice cracked with a terrifying protective panic. I'm fine, Kang-dae, I'm okay, Amara said quickly, her heart swelling at the sheer, desperate love in his eyes. Once he was absolutely sure she was unharmed, the panic in Kang-dae's chest turned into cold, lethal venom. He slowly turned his long, sharp face toward the 3 trembling thugs. With a movement so fast the eye could barely track it, Kang-dae lunged forward. He grabbed the leader by the throat, lifting the grown man entirely off the ground with one muscular, tattooed arm, and slammed him violently against the stone pillar in the center of the shop. The glass shelves nearby rattled violently. Kang-dae, please. We didn't know. The man choked out, his boots dangling off the floor, his face turning purple. You came into my woman's shop, Kang-dae whispered, his voice a low, terrifying scraping sound that made the other 2 thugs drop to their knees in surrender. You ruined her beautiful displays. But your biggest mistake. Kang-dae leaned in closer, his sharp eyes flashing with a terrifying possessiveness. You actually looked at her lips, and you dared to talk about the beauty of her lips. That is your true offense. Those lips belong to me. If you or anyone from your pathetic gang ever looks at, speaks of, or even dreams about her lips again, it will be the absolute bloody downfall of your entire lineage. Do you understand me? We apologize. We are so sorry, Boss Kang-dae. We will never come back. The leader gasped, tears of sheer terror escaping his eyes. Kang-dae dropped him to the floor like a piece of worthless garbage. Pick up every single dress. Dust them off. Apologize to the lady. And run before I change my mind. The three hardened street thugs scrambled on their hands and knees, frantically hanging the silk dresses back up with trembling hands, bowing repeatedly to Amara, before sprinting out of the shattered entrance into the pouring rain. Once the boutique was quiet again, Kang-dae turned to Amara. The murderous rage had vanished, replaced by a stubborn, unyielding authority. He clapped his hands twice. Instantly, two of his tallest, most imposing, armed security guards stepped forward, standing like stone statues on either side of the boutique entrance. Amara crossed her arms, her gorgeous lips forming a stubborn pout. Kang-dae, I told you, I don't care what you told me, Kang-dae interrupted. Stepping right into her space, his chest pressed against hers. He looked down at her with a look of absolute, immovable resolve. Whether you like it or not, as long as you are my girl, my security men will be standing right here every single time you are around. It is no longer a request, Amara. It is an order from the man who cannot live a single second if those beautiful lips of yours are in danger. Amara stared up at him, her heart doing a violent, happy flip. She wanted to argue, but looking at his fierce protectiveness, she knew she had already lost. She smiled, her lips parting beautifully, and Kang-dae's breath hitched all over again. The 3 months that followed were nothing short of a fairy tale written in the stars of the Seoul night. The city's ruthless underworld boss had completely transformed into a man entirely ruled by his heart. A beautiful, intoxicating routine blossomed between them. Kang-dae took full advantage of his new privileges. He no longer needed an excuse to see her. He would simply show up at her boutique unannounced, his towering, muscular frame leaning against her office doorframe just to watch her work. He'd walk straight past the 2 stone-faced guards he had stationed there, pull Amara into his arms, and claim a deep, lingering kiss whenever the desire struck him. He would pop up at her penthouse at midnight just because he missed the scent of her vanilla and cocoa butter skin, or surprise her with lunch dates where he spent more time staring at her mouth than eating his food. Amara, for her part, was floating. She had always been so independent, so fiercely guarded, but she had fallen so deeply in love that she didn't even realize how completely she had surrendered her heart to him. She felt entirely secure, entirely cherished. Their love story quickly became the quiet talk of the town. In high society, galas, and the whispers of the underworld, everyone was marveling at how the silver-haired demon of Seoul had been utterly tamed. Kang-dae's concentration on his Mafia empire began to slip drastically. He missed syndicate strategy meetings, ignored territorial updates, and left the daily operations completely to Min-jun in his trusted inner circle. While his strong team managed to cover up his absence and keep the peace, Kang-dae simply did not care. His only empire now was Amara. They spent almost every night together weaving a tapestry of beautiful, quiet moments. One particular Friday night, they were in Kang-dae's massive, ultra-modern penthouse. The neon lights of the city reflected off the glass, but inside, the atmosphere was warm and soft. Amara was sitting between his legs on the living room rug, her back resting against his solid chest, while he gently combed through her hair with his large, tattooed fingers. A sensory, relaxing ritual they had both grown to love. "You're remarkably good at this for a man who cracks skulls for a living," Amara teased, tilting her head back to look at him. Kang-dae leaned down, his sharp, angular face softening as he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "For you, I have all the patience in the world. I could stay like this for 100 years. Amara smiled, her plush lips curving beautifully in the dim light. Don't say that. You'll make me believe it." "Believe it," he whispered, his voice a deep, gravelly vow, "because it's the only truth I have left." They stayed up until the early hours of the morning, sharing whispers, laughter, and a profound emotional intimacy that made them feel completely invincible. But the higher you fly, the harder the fall. The golden trance shattered on a warm Tuesday evening over something incredibly trivial. They were back at Kang-dae's house preparing to order dinner. Amara was mentioning a new international distribution contract she was signing for her boutique, a massive deal she had worked on for weeks. Kang-dae, caught up in his fierce, protective instincts, casually intercepted the paperwork from her bag, glanced at it, and immediately dialed Min-jun. "Min-jun," Kang-dae ordered into the phone, his Mafia boss tone returning effortlessly. "Run a full background check on this American distributor. Check their liquid assets and their hidden ties. If they have even a single shadow, cancel the contract from our end." He hung up, entirely casual, expecting a thank you. But when he looked at Amara, the air in the room froze. Amara stood up, her tall frame rigid with sudden, burning fury. To Kang-dae, it was a routine safety check. But to Amara, a self-made woman who prided herself on her intellect and independence, it felt like a massive boundary had been crossed. It felt like he was treating her like an incompetent child who couldn't handle her own business. "Did you just interfere in my company's contract without my permission?" Amara's voice was dangerously low, her gorgeous lips set in a tight, furious line. Kang-dae blinked, genuinely confused. "Amara, I am just protecting you. I need to make sure these people are clean before you sign anything. I don't need you to vet my clients, Kang-dae. I am the CEO of my brand," she snapped, her eyes flashing with a mix of hurt and anger. "You don't get to control my life under the guise of protecting me. I am not one of your syndicate soldiers." "Don't be ridiculous, it's a simple background check," Kang-dae replied, his own stubborn pride flaring up, his tone hardening. "I'm leaving," Amara said flatly. She grabbed her handbag and her coat, her chest heaving with emotion. "Amara, stop. It's midnight. Don't do this over nothing," Kang-dae growled, standing up to his full height, his long gray hair casting a shadow over his face. But she was already marching toward the door. "I need space. Do not follow me." Despite his anger, the Mafia king would sooner die than let her drive through the city alone at night, especially while furious. As Amara stormed out to the driveway to get into her car, Min-jun and two armored security vehicles were already waiting, their engines purring in the dark. Kang-dae stood on the porch, his muscular arms crossed over his chest, his expression dark and unyielding. He didn't try to physically stop her, respecting her boundary, but enforcing his safety. He walked up to Min-jun, his voice a cold, tight command. "Take her home, secure the perimeter. Make sure she steps inside her door, safe and sound." He looked at Amara through the car window, clenching his jaw. "Tomorrow will be okay," he told himself, trying to calm the frantic racing of his heart. "When she cools down, we will talk about it. It's just a silly argument." But as Amara's car pulled away into the dark Seoul night, she sat in the back seat, her heart aching with a deep, confusing pain. She was telling herself she was justified, but deep down, a heavy weight settled in her stomach. Neither of them knew that this petty, prideful clash was not just a temporary misunderstanding. It was the absolute beginning of an unnecessary, exhausting war between them, a fracture that would test just how strong their golden love story truly was. The next morning, the Seoul sun was bright, but inside Kang-dae's chest, it felt like midnight. He stood before the full-length mirror in his penthouse, adjusting the lapels of a sharp midnight blue suit. He had spent the remaining hours of the night convincing himself that women just needed a grand gesture after an argument. He was a man who handled multi-million-dollar crises. Surely a domestic dispute could be solved with a simple peace offering. By 9 a.m., the towering 6'3" Mafia king was standing outside Amara's penthouse door. In his massive, tattooed hands, he held a massive, breathtaking bouquet of white roses and orchids. He looked stunning, his silver gray hair perfectly styled, his sharp face softened by a hopeful, vulnerable expression. He took a deep breath and rang the bell, expecting her to open the door, roll her eyes, and let him pull her into a reassuring embrace. Inside, Amara had spent the entire night pacing her living room. She hadn't slept a wink. Her eyes were burning, her throat dry. She missed him terribly. She missed the heavy, comforting weight of his arm around her waist, and she missed the deep, gravelly hum of his voice. She was exhausted, and every emotional defense she had was worn down to a fraying wire. Ding-dong. When the chime rang, her heart leaped. She ran to the door, pulling it open. But the moment her eyes locked onto his towering frame, the sight of him standing there, so effortlessly handsome, so perfectly composed, holding a casual bunch of flowers, as if he hadn't completely insulted her intelligence the night before, something violently snapped inside her. The sheer exhaustion and hurt twisted instantly into a blind, overwhelming surge of resentment. She didn't see the love in his eyes. She only saw a man who thought a bouquet could buy her compliance. Before Kang-dae could even utter a good morning, Amara reached out, violently snatched the heavy bouquet from his hands, and threw it straight down onto the polished floor. The delicate white petals scattered and crushed beneath her feet. Without a single word, she slammed the heavy oak door right in his face. Slam! The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. Kang-dae froze. His hands remained frozen in mid-air, still shaped around the ghost of the bouquet. The absolute shock of the rejection hit him like a physical blow, knocking the breath straight from his lungs. For a long, agonizing minute, the feared syndicate leader just stood there, staring at the blank wood of the door. On the other side of that wood, Amara collapsed against the door. She slid down to the floor, burying her face in her knees, and began to sob uncontrollably. Her chest heaved with violent, hot tears. "Why do I hate him so much right now?" she cried out in her heart, her mind a chaotic war zone. "I love him so deeply, it terrifies me. But looking at him makes me feel so small, so helpless. I hate how much power he has over my feelings." Outside, Kang-dae slowly lowered his hands, clenching them into fists. Through the heavy wood, the muffled, agonizing sound of her crying reached his ears. A sharp, terrifying fear pierced his chest, a fear far worse than facing a dozen loaded guns. He was losing her, and he had no idea how to stop it. From that catastrophic morning onward, the golden trance of their love story vanished, replaced by an agonizing, toxic cycle. There was no more peace. For the next 3 weeks, their relationship became a devastating battlefield. Whenever they crossed paths, it ended in one of two ways. Either Amara would look at his sharp face, her beautiful lips trembling, and dissolve into bitter, silent tears, or she would flare up in a volatile, screaming match over absolutely nothing. Kang-dae was running entirely crazy. The ruthless, calculating mafia boss was reduced to a ghost of a man. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat, and he couldn't think. Sometimes, in the dead of night, his sports car would roar down her street, and he would simply park across from her gate, staring up at her dark bedroom window for hours before driving back to his empty penthouse, utterly defeated. What did I do? He would ask himself, his mind spinning in a relentless, exhausting circle. How did a pair of lips go from being my paradise to my absolute executioner? Kang-dae was so deeply consumed by his grief and the agonizing war with Amara that his legendary situational awareness completely evaporated. He was entirely vulnerable, and in his world, vulnerability is an invitation for treason. Seeing the legendary boss completely distracted, a high-ranking member of Kang-dae's own inner circle decided the time had come to strike. His name was Jae-hyun, a cold, ambitious lieutenant who had secretly envied Kang-dae's throne for years. Jae-hyun noticed that Kang-dae was barely reading the syndicate ledgers, skipping vital security briefings and leaving the keys to the empire completely unguarded. While Min-jun was frantically trying to cover for the boss, Jae-hyun quietly began his betrayal. Over the course of 2 weeks, Jae-hyun systematically bled Kang-dae's empire dry from the inside. Jae-hyun used his security clearance to access Kang-dae's private underground vault in the Incheon docks, stealing over $10 million in untraceable cash and raw gold bullion. He managed to duplicate the syndicate's highly confidential Black Ledger, supreme document containing the identities of every corrupt politician, judge, and police chief on Kang-dae's payroll. Jae-hyun secretly forged Kang-dae's signature on digital manifestos, transferring ownership of 3 highly lucrative international shipping routes over to a rival syndicate, the Iron Wolves, the very same gang Kang-dae had humiliated in Amara's boutique. It was a catastrophic, massive theft that should have instantly triggered a bloody gang war. But Kang-dae noticed absolutely nothing. When Min-jun tried to hand him an urgent report about the sudden financial discrepancies in the Incheon accounts, Kang-dae simply pushed the paperwork away. His bloodshot eyes staring blankly at the wall, his mind entirely trapped in the memory of Amara's tears. The snake had successfully stolen the keys to the castle, and the king was too heartbroken to even notice his crown was slipping. The psychological torture had reached its absolute limit. Kang-dae was no longer a man. He was a desperate, feral creature driven by a single, burning need to fix the fracture between his soul and Amara's. Bypassing his security, his silver gray hair messy and his eyes bloodshot, he stormed straight into Amara's luxury boutique. The 2 guards at the door took one look at his terrifying expression and wisely stepped aside. Amara was standing by a rack of clothes. The moment she turned and her eyes locked onto his towering, muscular frame, the volatile storm inside her erupted. She didn't say a word. She sprinted across the boutique, her face twisted in a mixture of raw anger and heartbreak, and began violently beating her fists against his massive, tattooed chest. I hate you so much," she cried out, her voice cracking as hot tears streamed down her face. She pounded against his chest with all her might, screaming out every ounce of the confusing, agonizing frustration that had consumed her for weeks. Kang-dae didn't flinch. He absorbed the blows like a stone wall, his jaw clenching. He realized that talking here, in the open, was useless. The time for gentle negotiation was over. Without warning, he leaned down, scooped Amara up in one swift, muscular movement, and hoisted her right over his broad shoulder. "Let me go, Kang-dae, put me down," she screamed, kicking her legs against his back. Kang-dae ignored her completely. He marched out of the boutique, threw her into the front seat of his armored sedan. locked the doors from his master panel, and tore down the streets of Seoul straight to his penthouse. When they slammed through his front doors, he locked the security deadbolts with a heavy thud. He turned to face her, his sharp face cast in dark shadows, his voice an absolute, unyielding command. "If you do not tell me the exact reason why we are fighting, neither of us is stepping a single foot out of this house today." The 24-hour silence. What followed was a brutal, agonizing 24-hour siege. They stayed inside the penthouse, completely cut off from the world. But instead of talking, a suffocating silence filled the rooms. Amara sat on the edge of the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring blankly at the wall. Deep down, she was in absolute turmoil. She couldn't hold it anymore because, in truth, she didn't even know why she was fighting. She didn't know why she was so furious. The only thing her heart knew was that the moment Kang-dae left her sight, she missed him so intensely, it felt like physical sickness. But the exact second he stood in front of her, a wave of profound, inexplicable irritation washed over her. She couldn't stand to look at him, yet she couldn't breathe without him. Driven by her stubborn anger and confusion, Amara rejected everything. Kang-dae cooked her favorite meals. She pushed the plates away. He brought her water, tea, fresh juice. She refused to touch a single drop. Hour after hour passed, her body, deprived of nourishment and exhausted from weeks of crying and fighting, began to rapidly weaken. By the 20th hour, she stood up from the sofa, intending to walk to the window, but the room suddenly tilted violently. Her vision went dark. "Amara?" Kang-dae's voice echoed in panic as he saw her sway. Before he could reach her, her knees buckled, and she fainted, collapsing onto the rug. "Amara!" Kang-dae roared, his heart completely stopping. He lunged across the room, scooping her limp, pale body into his arms. The feared Mafia king was trembling with sheer terror. He carried her straight to his bed and immediately dialed his private, highly trusted syndicate doctor. "Get to my penthouse right now. If you aren't here in 5 minutes, I will burn the hospital down." Within minutes, the medical team arrived, setting up diagnostic equipment in the master bedroom. Kang-dae paced the floor like a caged beast, his hands clenching and unclenching, his long gray hair hanging over his frantic eyes. Finally, the elderly doctor stepped back, removing his stethoscope. He looked at the terrifying Mafia boss, a sudden, warm smile breaking across his face. "Relax, Boss Kang-dae. She is physically exhausted and dehydrated, which caused the fainting spell, but she is not in danger." "Then why has she been acting like a madwoman for a month?" Kang-dae demanded, his voice cracking with emotion. "Why does she look at me and weep? Why does she hate me?" The doctor chuckled softly. "Because, boss, she is 8 weeks pregnant. The extreme mood swings, the sudden bouts of intense anger, the crying over nothing. It is a completely normal hormonal disruption on the body during early pregnancy." Kang-dae froze. The words echoed in the quiet room. Pregnant. The great, untouchable Mafia king looked completely stunned, his sharp jaw dropping slightly. He looked from the doctor to Amara's quiet sleeping form on the bed. He was going to be a father. The realization washed over him like a wave of blinding light, clearing away every single doubt, every piece of grief, and every ounce of confusion. While Kang-dae was staring at the love of his life in a daze of sudden joy, the traitor was capitalizing on his final moment of vulnerability. Deep in the underground vaults of the syndicate's financial headquarters, Jae-hyun, the traitorous lieutenant, was moving rapidly. He knew the boss was completely locked away in his penthouse with Amara, totally oblivious to the world. This is the last time, Jae-hyun whispered to himself, his fingers flying across a secure laptop screen as he initiated a massive final wire transfer. I must get as much as I can and run for good, before the demon wakes up. Boss, welcome back, sir. Kang-dae didn't smile. The stakes were no longer just about territory or money. Now, a traitor had threatened the stability of the empire that kept his pregnant queen and his unborn child safe. Assemble the inner circle in the primary war room, Kang-dae commanded, his voice a low, gravelly vibration. And bring me every digital and physical ledger from the last 3 months. Now. For the next 4 hours, Kang-dae sat at the head of the massive mahogany table in his private fortress. The room was dark, lit only by the blue glow of security monitors and financial spreadsheets projected onto the walls. As he studied the records, the sheer scale of Jae-hyun's betrayal laid itself bare. 10 million from Incheon, the black ledger duplicated. Shipping routes handed over to the Iron Wolves. A quiet, terrifying rage built inside Kang-dae's chest. The anger wasn't loud. It was a freezing, calculated storm. He realized that while he had been drowning in his own grief, staring at Amara's window in the rain, his own brother in arms had been plotting his demise. He took advantage of my silence, Kang-dae murmured, his eyes reflecting the glowing data. He slowly clenched his fist, his scarred knuckles popping in the quiet room. He thought my love made me weak. I am going to show him that it makes me a monster. Kang-dae immediately began drawing up a relentless, aggressive strategy to trap the fleeing snake. He ordered Min-jun to freeze every domestic asset linked to Jae-hyun's shell companies. He contacted underground brokers across Asia, placing a massive bounty on Jae-hyun's head that made his stolen millions completely useless to spend. Kang-dae sent a direct, brutal message to the leadership of the Iron Wolves. Return the shipping routes by midnight, or I will personally paint your docks with the blood of your captains. The wolves, terrified of the silver-haired demon's return, immediately relinquished the routes. Deployed as heavily armed enforcement teams to every port, private runway, and train station in South Korea, Jae-hyun was officially a rat trapped in a cage. But before Kang-dae stepped a single foot out into the night to hunt, his primary focus was the absolute security of Amara. He walked back into the penthouse master suite, where Amara was sitting up, eating a warm bowl of soup the doctor had prepared. She looked up as he entered, sensing the heavy, dangerous aura radiating from him. Kang-dae sat on the edge of the bed, his massive hands gently taking hers. The coldness in his eyes instantly melted into a look of fierce, protective devotion. "Have to go clean up my house, Amara," he said softly, his thumb tracing the back of her hand. "But while I'm gone, you are going to be safe, safer than anyone in this city." He had transformed his penthouse into an impenetrable fortress. He stationed 12 of his most elite, heavily armed loyalists directly inside the penthouse lobby and corridors. 3 bulletproof SUVs were parked at the entrance, with orders to secure the street. He changed the digital security codes of the entire building, routing them through his personal phone. No one, not even his own men, could enter without his biometric approval. Amara looked at him, her beautiful lips parting as she felt the immense protective gravity of his love. She didn't argue this time. She knew she was carrying his child, and she knew his world was bleeding. "Bring yourself back to me," she whispered, her voice filled with quiet strength. "Both of us are waiting for you." Kang-dae leaned down, pressing a deep, lingering kiss to her warm lips, holding her close as if storing her scent for the war ahead. "I will always come back to you," he vowed. The moment the penthouse doors locked behind him, the hunt was on. Jae-hyun, the traitor, was already running for his life, He had realized the exact second the syndicate accounts froze that the king had awakened. The easy, quiet escape he had planned had turned into a desperate, panicked flight through the dark, rainy alleys of Seoul. With Kang-dae's men closing the borders, Jae-hyun was forced to hide in the shadows, clutching his heavy duffel bag of stolen cash, jumping at every siren in every shadow. He had stolen millions, but he was currently a penniless ghost, running from the silver-haired wrath of the man he had dared to betray. The storm had returned to Seoul, and the demon of the underworld was hot on his trail. The coordinate flashed in neon green on the tactical screen of Kang-dae's command SUV. Jae-hyun was hiding in an abandoned, rain-slicked container yard near the southern docks of Incheon, waiting for a black market smuggler's boat that would never arrive. "We go in hot," Kang-dae's voice crackled through the secure comms. "No sirens, no mistakes. I want him alive." 3 midnight black armored SUVs tore through the industrial fog of the shipyard with terrifying, silent speed. The vehicles were custom beasts, fitted with reinforced steel grills, bulletproof plating, and thermal imaging cameras. The moment they breached the perimeter, the operation moved with lethal, clockwork precision. 2 tactical teams in full black combat gear and night vision visors deployed from the rear vehicles, fanning out to cut off the escape routes. Jae-hyun saw the dark shapes slicing through the mist and sprinted toward a rusted warehouse, clutching his heavy duffel bag of stolen gold and cash. A flashbang grenade detonated inside the warehouse with a deafening bang flash, disorienting the traitor. Before the smoke could clear, Kang-dae himself breached the side door. Jae-hyun, coughing and blind, pulled a pistol, but Kang-dae was faster. Moving like a striking panther, the Mafia boss delivered a brutal, calculated kick to Jae-hyun's wrist, sending the gun clattering across the concrete. In a fluid, overwhelming display of raw strength, Kang-dae slammed the traitor face first onto a stack of wooden pallets, pinning his hands behind his back. "Please, Kang-dae, don't kill me," Jae-hyun whimpered, his face pressed against the rough wood. "Death is too merciful for a snake," Kang-dae hissed, his voice cold as ice. "You have something that belongs to my family." They dragged Jae-hyun out, threw him into the back of an armored transport, and recovered the heavy duffel bag containing the stolen gold, the digital ledger, and millions in cash. Instead of taking him to a shallow grave, they brought Jae-hyun to the syndicate's private, subterranean holding facility, an underground prison hidden deep beneath a legitimate shipping scrapyard. It was a concrete tomb. The cell was reinforced with thick, double-layered titanium bars, monitored by 24-hour motion-tracking cameras, and guarded by 4 heavily armed loyalists who reported only to Min-jun. Min-chon's team spent hours systematically recovering every single asset Jae-hyun had hidden. They locked down his offshore accounts, traced his wire transfers, and secured the physical gold bullion back in the syndicate's primary vault. With the empire restored and the snake locked in a titanium cage, the weight finally lifted from Kang-dae's shoulders. He had cleaned his house. His family was safe. It was past 2 a.m. when Kang-dae finally unlocked the front door of his penthouse. The heavy metallic scent of the streets and the cold fury of the hunt instantly melted away the moment he stepped inside. The air was warm, scented with sweet vanilla and lavender. Amara was awake, sitting on the sofa wrapped in a soft silk robe. The moment her eyes met his, she didn't see the feared boss. She saw her protector. She stood up and walked into his arms. Kang-dae pulled her flush against his chest, burying his face in her soft hair, holding her so tightly it felt as if he were trying to merge their souls. His massive, tattooed arms wrapped securely around her waist, and his hand gently slid down to cup her flat stomach. "Is the snake locked away?" she whispered, looking up at him with her beautiful, plush lips slightly parted. He is caged. The Empire is safe, Kang-dae murmured, his sharp face melting into a look of absolute, breathtaking adoration. But more importantly, how are you? How is our baby? We missed you, Amara smiled, a soft tear of relief slipping down her cheek. Kang-dae leaned down and kissed her. It was a slow, incredibly tender kiss filled with a quiet, burning passion. The air in the penthouse was thick with a love so pure it felt untouchable. For the rest of the night, they lay in each other's arms, whispering about the future, completely wrapped in the sweet sanctuary of their bond. A month passed and the peace was beautiful. Amara's pregnancy was progressing wonderfully, and Kang-dae was the ultimate doting partner. He read pregnancy books, monitored her vitamin intake, and pampered her constantly. But one rainy Tuesday evening, Amara sat up on the sofa, her eyes wide with a sudden, intense longing. "Kang-dae," she said, her beautiful lips forming a dramatic pout. "I need Nigerian food, specifically igutsi soup and pounded yam, the kind my mom used to make for me back in Atlanta, the way my father's family taught her. If I don't eat it tonight, I think I might actually die." Kang-dae laughed, kissing her forehead. "You will not die. I will find it." He immediately located a highly authentic hidden gem of a Nigerian restaurant in Itaewon, owned by an expat family. He cleared out the entire restaurant for the evening, ensuring absolute privacy, and drove Amara there with a tight four-man security detail stationed at the entrance. The dinner was paradise. Amara ate with pure, joyful satisfaction, her face glowing as the nostalgic spices reminded her of her childhood. Kang-dae watched her, completely captivated, tracing the movement of her beautiful lips as she laughed and talked about her family. "Excuse me for a moment, my love," Kang-dae smiled, standing up. "I need to wash my hands." Kang-dae walked into the quiet, dimly lit restroom at the back of the restaurant. As he turned on the faucet, washing the spices from his hands, his encrypted satellite phone suddenly vibrated violently against the marble counter. He picked it up. It was Min-jun. "Boss!" Min-jun's voice was frantic, breathless with pure terror. "The underground facility. There was a security breach. An inside mole cut the power grid. Jae-hyun has escaped his cell. He is on the run." Kang-dae's blood instantly ran cold. A terrifying animalistic instinct flared in his chest. The restaurant. The guards. Without even hanging up the phone, Kang-dae kicked the restroom door open, sprinting out into the main dining area. His long, silver hair whipped wild across his face, his eyes wide with a sudden, breathless panic. "Amara," he roared. But as he burst into the dining room, the world stopped spinning. The tables were overturned. The scent of authentic spices was completely drowned out by the metallic, burning smell of gunpowder. Near the shattered glass entrance, his two elite guards lay in pools of dark blood, shot dead. The chair where Amara had been sitting was empty. Her half-eaten plate was cold. Amara was gone. A silence so heavy and dark settled over the restaurant, followed by a sound that would terrify anyone who heard it. Kang-dae threw his head back, his muscular chest expanding, and let out a guttural, earth-shattering roar of pure, untamed agony. The roar of a wild beast whose mate and unborn child had just been stolen from his cave. The silver-haired demon was no longer playing by the rules of survival. He was going to burn the city to ashes. The drive back to the penthouse was a blur of pure, unadulterated madness. Kang-dae did not drive his sports car. He piloted it like a weapon. The tires of his armored SUV shrieked against the asphalt. smoke billowing from the wheel wells as he tore through red lights and sliced through tight alleyways, entirely blind to everything but the empty seat beside him. The metallic scent of blood from the restaurant was still burned into his nostrils, and the quiet, sweet memory of Amara's laughter only minutes prior played on a torturous, agonizing loop in his mind. When he slammed into the penthouse, he didn't weep. He didn't hesitate. He marched straight into his private Armaria hidden room behind the master closet. He stripped off his tailored designer jacket and threw on his combat gear. He pulled on a black, high-grade tactical vest, strapping heavy Kevlar plates tight across his massive chest. He wrapped tactical holsters around his thick thighs, securing twin customized handguns, and slipped a serrated steel combat blade into his boot.
Ring.
Min-jun and a towering, fiercely loyal syndicate enforcer named Daeshan burst through the heavy front doors. Daeshan was a quiet giant, a man who had sworn his life to Kang-dae years ago after the boss saved his family from a rival gang. They ran into the armory, breathless and pale. "We are here, boss," Min-jun said, his hand resting on his weapon, his eyes reflecting the dark, terrifying resolve radiating from his leader. "What can we do?" Kang-dae turned around, his silver gray hair messy, his eyes dark, hollow, and utterly devoid of humanity. "The traitor is not just one person." Kang-dae's voice was a low, terrifying growl that rattled the glass cases in the armory. "Jae-hyun could not have breached my holding cell alone. He has snakes feeding him information from within our own ranks. There are many among us. If we deploy the entire syndicate, the leaks will warn him and they will kill Amara before we even reach the perimeter. This war, we are going to fight with just the three of us." Min-chun's eyes widened, and Daeshan stepped forward, his deep voice filled with urgent concern. "No, boss. We have some other loyal men. Men I would personally take a bullet for. Let us bring them. We cannot go into a nest of vipers with only 3 guns." Kang-dae stared at him for a long, heavy second. The air in the room was thick with the scent of gun oil and cold, suffocating dread. "Call them," Kang-dae ordered, his voice clipping like ice. "But only 3. It has to be quiet. It has to be low. If a single word of our movement leaks, I will personally strip the skin from the man responsible." Within 10 minutes, 3 more of Daehan's most trusted, silent executioners arrived. They loaded their trunks with heavy assault rifles, time munition, and smoke canisters. Just as the 5 of them were finishing their tactical preparation, checking their magazines, and strapping on their communication earpieces, Kang-dae's personal phone buzzed violently on the armory table. An unknown number. Kang-dae snatched it, pressing it to his ear. The entire room went dead silent. Kang-dae, a shaky, mocking voice, sneered on the other end. "It was Jae-shan, the traitor. I hope you enjoyed your dinner. Now let's make a deal. You grant me my absolute freedom. You sign over the shipping routes permanently, wire the frozen millions to my secure accounts, and promise never to hunt me again. If you don't do exactly as I say, in 6 hours, you will get her corpse and the babies." Kang-dae's hand clenched around the phone so tightly the glass screen began to crack. His chest heaved, a terrifying, savage look overtaking his sharp features. "You dare touch my woman," Kang-dae whispered into the receiver, a chilling promise of violence that made the seasoned soldiers around him shudder. "You dare touch my baby. You are dead. Every single one of you is already dead." He slammed the phone down, refusing to give the traitor the satisfaction of a negotiation. "We move now," he roared to his men. "He's at the Incheon shipyard. We don't have 6 hours. We have minutes. using an encrypted tracker that Min-jun managed to trace from the exact cell tower that routed Jae-shien's call. They locked on to the escape party. Jae-hyun and his remaining co-conspirators had retreated to a dilapidated, off-grid shipyard warehouse on the outskirts of Inchanth, the perfect place to hold a hostage while waiting for a foreign cargo vessel. The night was pitch black, a heavy downpour washing over the shipping containers, masking the sound of the team's arrival. The six-man strike team moved with terrifying, silent speed. They bypassed the main road, slipping through the rusted metal fences of the shipyard, utilizing the shadows of the massive shipping crates. Daehyun and the three recruited loyalists took up sniper positions on the high crane platforms, locking down the warehouse exits. Kang-dae and Min-jun stood at the rear metal entrance. With a silent nod, Min-jun placed a small, specialized thermite charge on the lock. The door flew open. Kang-dae was the first one through the smoke, moving with the terrifying agility of an apex predator. Inside the warehouse, the layout was chaotic. 5 heavily armed rogue syndicate members, the internal traitors who had helped Jae-hyun escape, instantly raised their weapons. "Breach! Kill them!" one of the traitors screamed. But they were too slow. Bang, bang, bang. Jae-shien's snipers fired through the skylight, taking down 2 of the traitors instantly with clean, high-caliber headshots. Kang-dae slid behind a metal crate, popping out to fire 3 rapid, precise rounds that neutralized another 2 rogue soldiers before they could even aim. That left only 1 guard near the center platform, and Jae-hyun, who was holding a trembling gun to a bound, bruised Amara. Amara was tied to a heavy wooden chair in the middle of the floor, her hair damp, her face pale, but her eyes burning with fierce, unbroken defiance. Jae-hyun, completely unhinged upon realizing his leverage was gone and that Kang-dae had ignored the 6-hour ultimatum, let out a panicked scream. He didn't even try to run or negotiate. In his manic desperation, he began backing away, aiming his gun directly at Amara's chest. "If I'm going down, I'm taking her with me," Jae-hyun shrieked. At that exact microsecond, Kang-dae made his move. He didn't dive for cover. He didn't hesitate. He knew that any delay would mean a bullet hitting Amara or their unborn child. He chose to become her human shield. Kang-dae lunged forward, throwing his massive 6 feet 3 inches frame directly into the line of fire. Ba-bang! 2 heavy rifle rounds tore through the air from the remaining rogue ballard. The first shot grazed Kang-dae's shoulder, tearing through his tactical gear and flesh. The second shot struck him deep in the side of his abdomen, bypassing the lower edge of his Kevlar plate. A sharp, blinding agony ripped through his body, but the Mafia king did not fall. Using the sheer, superhuman momentum of his love, Kang-dae fired his own weapon while still in midair. His bullet struck the last rogue guard directly between the eyes, dropping him instantly. Before Jae-hyun could pull his trigger, Kang-dae slammed into him like a freight train. He didn't let the traitor leave. He didn't offer a deal. He didn't let him walk away.
Bang!
With absolute, remorseless finality, Kang-dae fired a bullet straight through the traitor's chest at point-blank range. Jae-hyun gasped, his eyes widening in shock, before his body slumped to the concrete floor, completely lifeless. The traitor was dead. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of the pouring rain against the metal roof and Kang-dae's ragged, painful breathing. He stumbled backward, clutching his bleeding side, his face pale as he rushed over to Amara. With trembling, bloody hands, he pulled his combat blade and sliced through the ropes binding her wrists. The moment she was free, Amara didn't shrink away from the blood or the violence. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder, weeping tears of pure, overwhelming relief. "You're shot! Oh my God, Kang-dae, you're bleeding!" She panicked, her hands desperately pressing against the dark, warm stain spreading across his shirt. "I am fine," Kang-dae gasped, a weak, beautiful smile breaking through his exhaustion as he cupped her face, his thumb gently tracing her soft, beautiful lips. "As long as you and the baby are breathing, I am invincible." Minjun and Dahyun rushed over, quickly applying a tactical pressure dressing to Kang-dae's wound. He refused to go to the hospital, ordering them to take them straight back to the penthouse, where his private doctor was already waiting. An hour later, the penthouse doors were once again locked, sealing out the dark, violent world. For 2 solid weeks, the fearsome, 6'3" silver-haired sovereign of Seoul's underworld was entirely bound to his bed. The bullet had torn deep through his side, leaving a jagged path of stitches and raw, burning agony. He had survived the physical hit, but the recovery was a slow, grueling climb. And right beside him, scaling that mountain with him every single second, was Amara. Amara barely slept. She became a restless, frantic force of nature inside the penthouse, her mind locked in a constant state of high-alert panic. She kept a rigorous schedule, charting his pain medications down to the exact minute, hovering over him to ensure he swallowed every pill, and personally preparing mild, nutrient-rich broths to rebuild his strength. Every time Kang-dae so much as shifted in bed or let out a low, subconscious groan in his sleep, Amara would instantly startle awake from her spot on the edge of the mattress, her heart hammering, checking his bandages for fresh blood. Kang-dae watched her. From his pillow, his dark eyes followed her tall, elegant frame as she hurried back and forth, her face growing paler by the day, dark circles bruising the skin under her eyes. He saw the subtle, frantic tremor in her hands when she handed him his water glass, and the way she constantly bit her lower lip, unconsciously out of sheer, unadulterated terror of losing him. He wanted to tell her to rest. He wanted to pull her down and hold her, but he remained quiet, his throat tight with a heavy, suffocating guilt. He had done this to her. His world, his guns, and his enemies had turned his fiercely independent, vibrant woman into a terrified, sleepless shadow of herself. The breaking point arrived on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Amara was standing by the bedside table, carefully measuring out his afternoon antibiotics, when her hands suddenly began to shake violently. The medicine spoon clattered against the wood.
"Amara?"
Kang-dae rasped, pushing himself up on his elbows, his stitches screaming in protest. Before she could answer, her eyes rolled back. The room tilted and her body went completely limp, collapsing onto the carpet.
"Amara," Kang-dae roared, throwing the heavy duvet aside, ignoring the white-hot flash of pain in his side as he dragged himself out of bed and fell to his knees beside her. Within 20 minutes, his private doctor arrived. After a tense, thorough examination, the doctor stepped back and sighed, looking at Kang-dae with a stern, warning expression. "Boss Kang-dae, she is completely, utterly exhausted. Her blood pressure is dangerously low from lack of sleep, stress, and poor nutrition. You must understand she is carrying your child. The first trimester is highly delicate. If you do not keep her calm, safe, warm, and in a completely stress-free environment, she will lose this baby. Her body cannot handle this level of terror." The doctor's words hit Kang-dae harder than any bullet ever could. For the rest of the day, the Mafia king went completely mute. He sat silently on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the rain washing over the window pane. When Amara finally woke up, weak but conscious, he gently fed her a warm bowl of soup,
wrapped her in his softest cashmere blankets, and held her hand. But he didn't say a single word. He was physically there, but his mind was wrestling in a dark, violent, and agonizingly quiet war with his own identity. At around 4 a.m., when the penthouse was wrapped in a heavy, freezing silence, Kang-dae turned to look at Amara sleeping beside him. He reached out, his large, tattooed hand hovering just over her belly. He couldn't do this anymore. "Amara," he whispered, gently brushing a soft curl away from her face. "Wake up, my love. We need to talk." Amara stirred, her tired eyes fluttering open in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. She looked at him, panic instantly rising in her chest. "Are you in pain? Is it your stitches?" "No," Kang-dae said, his deep, gravelly voice remarkably calm, yet filled with an immovable, historic resolve. He sat up, taking both of her hands in his. "I am ending the organization." Amara froze, her breath hitching. "What?" "I am dismantling the syndicate," he repeated, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a fierce, burning clarity. "I cannot put your life at risk anymore. I cannot put our baby's life at risk. I want to live. I want to have a family. I don't want my children running under the shadow of guns, checking the back seat of their cars, and living in constant fear of my past catching up to them. I have more than enough wealth, properties, and resources secured in different parts of the world to keep us safe, comfortable, and wealthy for 3 lifetimes. I am leaving Seoul. I am choosing you." A stunned, beautiful silence stretched between them. Then a massive, brilliant tear rolled down Amara's cheek, not of sorrow, but of sheer, overwhelming happiness. The heavy, exhausting weight of fear that had lived in her chest for months instantly vanished. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his silver hair, her body shaking with joyful, breathless relief. "Yes," she sobbed softly. "Yes, let's go home." The next morning, the great transition began. Kang-dae called Min-jun and his inner circle to the penthouse, and the monumental process of dismantling a multi-million-dollar empire commenced. Kang-dae was not a reckless leader. He was a king who cared for his subjects. Over the next month, he systematically closed down every single illegal operation, destroying ledgers and wiping digital footprints. But instead of leaving his men in the cold, he settled them with staggering, life-changing sums of money and legitimate resources. On the final day, the main warehouse was filled with hundreds of his loyal soldiers. Kang-dae stood before them, no longer in his tactical vest, but in a simple, elegant, dark coat. When Min-jun announced that every man was receiving a massive severance package to buy homes, start businesses, and live comfortably without ever returning to a life of crime, tears broke out among the hardened, tattooed enforcers. Many of them, including Dahyun, bowed deeply, their shoulders shaking as they wept openly. "Boss," Daexian choked out, his voice thick with emotion. "If it wasn't for you, most of us would have died on the cold streets of Seoul years ago. We had nothing to eat. We had no homes. You gave us shelter, you gave us respect, and you fed our families. And even now, as you leave, you are giving us a future. Thank you, boss. Thank you." Kang-dae walked down from the platform, shaking the hands of his men, his sharp face softened by a profound, peaceful gratitude. "Go live peaceful lives," he told them. "Take care of your families. The war is over." The air in Atlanta, Georgia, was warm, sweet, and filled with the scent of blooming magnoliaceae, stark and beautiful contrast to the cold, rain-slicked concrete of Seoul. Kang-dae and Amara had relocated to a stunning, sprawling estate surrounded by ancient oak trees, situated just minutes away from the warm, welcoming home of Amara's family. Without the constant suffocating threat of violence, Amara's health had rebounded spectacularly. Her skin glowed with a radiant vitality, and her beautiful, plush lips were constantly curved into peaceful, effortless smiles. Kang-dae, completely shed of his underworld armor, spent his days walking through their sunlit gardens, reading and learning the quiet art of a normal life. 6 months into her pregnancy, they made their love official. They didn't want a massive, flashy gala. Instead, they held a simple, breathtaking backyard wedding beneath a golden Georgia sunset, surrounded only by Amara's emotional family and a fiercely happy Min-jun, who had retired from the syndicate to manage their massive, legal global investments. Amara walked down the aisle in a flowing white silk gown that elegantly draped over her growing baby bump. Kang-dae stood at the altar looking stunning in a tailored beige linen suit, his silver gray hair catching the warm breeze, his eyes shining with a soft, emotional light he had never shown the world before. As they exchanged their vows under the canopy of oaks, Kang-dae slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. "I surrendered my empire for you," he whispered, his deep, gravelly voice thick with a lifetime of devotion. "And in return, you gave me the only kingdom that ever mattered." "I love you, my king," she whispered back, leaning up to press her incredibly soft, beautiful lips against his, sealing a promise of peace and safety. 3 months later, the quiet peace of the Atlanta estate was broken by the frantic, beautiful chaos of new life. Amara's labor began in the quiet hours of a humid southern dawn. Kang-dae, despite all his tactical training and legendary composure, completely panicked. He carried her to the car with trembling arms and drove to the private maternity wing they had booked, his heart hammering harder than it ever had during any gunfight. For 12 exhausting, agonizing hours, Kang-dae did not leave her side. He sat on the edge of the hospital bed, holding Amara's hand, letting her squeeze his fingers with all her strength as she fought through the waves of pain. He wiped the sweat from her brow, kissed her damp temple, and whispered steady, breathless words of encouragement into her ear. And then with one final exhausting push, a sharp, loud cry pierced the sterile quiet of the delivery room. The doctor smiled, lifting the newborn. "It's a boy. A beautiful, healthy baby boy." As the nurses gently cleaned the infant and laid him directly onto Amara's bare chest, Kang-dae froze. He looked down at his son. The baby had a surprisingly thick tuft of fine, light hair that caught the hospital lights, a soft, unmistakable crown of silver gray. Amara let out a weak, tearful laugh, her chest heaving with joy as she looked up at her husband. "He looks just like you, Kang-dae." Kang-dae fell to his knees beside the bed. The towering 6'3" giant, who had survived betrayals, bullets, and the coldness of a ruthless world, completely broke down. Hot, heavy tears streamed freely down his sharp face, dripping onto the bed sheets. He pressed his forehead gently against Amara's temple, his massive hand softly cupping the tiny, fragile back of his newborn son. In a voice cracked with raw, overwhelming emotion, he uttered a statement that made the doctor, the nurses, and Amara's waiting family in the doorway burst into tears. "Amara, you have given me a world. You have given me the family that I lost so many, many years ago. I spent my entire life walking through the dark, completely alone. But this child is going to represent my father that I lost. The legacy of my blood is no longer written in violence, but in love. Now, finally, I have a family of my own to look after." Amara reached out, her fingers weakly but warmly tangling in his silver hair, pulling him down for a soft, tear-stained kiss. "We are your home now, Kang-dae. We are never leaving you." The man who once ruled the Seoul underworld with a cold, terrifying grip became a man completely ruled by a tiny, silver-haired baby boy. Kang-dae took to fatherhood with a fierce, meticulous dedication. He stayed up for the 3 a.m. feedings, cradling his son against his massive, tattooed chest and rocking him to sleep while singing low, gravelly Korean lullabies. He learned how to swaddle with tactical precision, read every parenting book cover to cover, and stood guard over the nursery with a protective warmth that filled the entire house. The king officially has his happy ending. If you loved this story, hit that follow button, drop a like, and share this video with a friend who needs a good cry today. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next story.